All right, welcome into another episode. I'm Levi,
I'm Jacoby.
I'm Joe.
and this is the Thought Vessel Show. Let's jump in.
So, what are some of your favorite house rules for like anything? Specifically, we'll go with board games. Make it very easy. That could be expanded to other things.
Sure. I mean, for board games, we usually kind of start with the youngest player gets to go first. If it's just kind of a tabletop, whatever it might be.
I do it differently. Everyone has to look at each other and go, "Okay, who pooped last?
Oh, you're doing the hoop hoop last?
Who's the most recent pooper?"
Why did this go into like fecal already?
Now, hear me out though. Like the true Spike player would make a Taco Bell run before that.
See, here's the thing, right? In the household I was playing in, there was only like 4 ways to settle things. You throw hands, you see who pooped last, or you pick up some foam sticks and beat the shit out of each other.
And
You
see,
said 4 things and said 3 things.
math.
I don't remember the 4th, clearly.
Math. How does
Too many
how does it
concussions
work?
from the beat sticks.
The beat sticks and the hands.
Look, I mean, I was gonna go with like some tried and true. Like you can stack draw 2s in Uno.
Why would you do that?
Because then you pass the buck. You go, oh, hey, draw 2? Oh, I have one in my hand. Draw 2. The next person has to draw 4 unless they have a draw 2. Next person has to draw 6 and just keeps going down the line until you run out of draw 2s.
So when I learn a new board, the house rule I implement, I have a group of people excited for a board game like Betrayal, or for this instance, Dark Souls. I specifically say, okay, guys, we're trying this for the very first time, hardest difficulty.
Ah, yes, the shit your pants moment.
A board game seems infinitely less like awful after you try it for the first time and you intentionally put yourself in a position to get pub stomped.
You know, that's fair.
Like, you're not going to
Interesting.
feel bad losing to the 3 gargoyles when the first time you go in, you lost to like an archdemon and like 4 other minis, and the board is just covered in dudes.
I don't know. If I saw like 20 undead coming at me, I'm pretty sure I'm shitting my pants. They're going to be flailing at me.
I'm going to flex on them.
Now, question: the most famous house rule of all time. Do y'all put money underneath the free parking in Monopoly?
Ooh, yeah. I haven't played Monopoly in forever.
If you don't, you're a traitor.
Well, if you do, then the game goes for like 3 hours because you keep adding in a bunch of random money.
Oh, look, every housing market deal you've ever been a part of, taking longer than it should.
I mean, a lot of people go with the house rule of no auctioning properties. If you can't buy it, you don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know that happened a lot in my family. But like so many people just don't remember that the rule of auctioning exists.
Mhm.
And I've seen a lot of it in like Game Grumps content when they do the Monopoly. And they've just been going on auction spree after auction spree.
That does take some time for sure. For me, with the free parking or anything like that, anything you do that kind of delays the game longer, I think it's what makes Monopoly so hated by many people. But if you just let kind of people go bankrupt and like you get through the game faster.
Oh, there's another one that I know of, and it is nobody gets all of Australia in Risk.
So, ironically, the next rule I was going to think of for Risk, you could roll all of your attacks simultaneously. So instead of just going, you have 3 dice, I have 2 dice, we do this at infinitum because you have 100 dudes and I have 20 dudes. We just break down the math and go, I have 20 dice, you have 100 dice. Yeet.
Yeet.
It is. All right, this actually brings us into our next topic, which is going to be our Am I the Arch Enemy?
Ah, yes. Am I the arch enemy? Magic the Gathering addiction. Addiction.
You're not wrong.
Am I the arch enemy? Magic the Gathering edition. My friends and I like to play Magic the Gathering pretty frequently for fun. We have gone overboard with making powerful decks, and there have been mistakes in the past where we've overstepped too far into power over fun.
And his name is Urza.
And his name is Ernest Caesar.
Da, 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 da,
I even pronounced it wrong.
da, da,
His
da.
name is Urza Cena.
We're professional here.
Yeah, absolutely. But we now have rules to try to combat this. For a brief history, it started with me. I got obsessed with being the strongest dragon deck and mixed in Numot the Devastator to my Dragon Commander deck. Why is every single one of these Dragon? Or at least half of these?
That's why I picked him in the first round of our Scary Commanders draft.
Look, I'm going to set a boundary as the resident Wooburg player. Choose a different Wooburg.
You just mad because they got rats with wings.
Oh, those giant lizards that are super powerful and have evasion and damage-based effects and hexproof and legendary, and it's all in the same deck, and they keep building extra combat things and extra support for dragons in every set, I don't know why that would be a problem.
In the pile of bodies, what is one more titty?
It's all of those Timmy players.
Shh, don't you say this to me.
You know why I say this to you. Anyway, this meant on combat damage, I would destroy 2 lands on an opponent controls, essentially severely restricting their resources. After seeing how shattering it was to Attitude as a group, we decided no more land destruction. I want to note, I have not removed Numot from the deck. He's, for all intents and purposes, just a 6/6 dragon, and the destruction ability is ignored in the group. For anyone wondering why I had to stress intents and purposes, they put extensive purposes, and that's not how that's said. Intents and purposes.
Proud of you, English teacher.
I'm not even an English teacher. The individual I did this to hasn't let go of this. They've implemented land destruction and seem to really target me when we play, even ignoring excessive threats on the board to target me specifically with mill spells or destruction spells. I keep warning him, if you use these, I'm going to assume these things are now on the table. I will do them to you as well if you're okay with using these spells. Here comes the issue. He keeps pressing on, and in response, I've been doing the same. I can handle the heat, though truthfully, most times I do have my fair share of bitching about things that happen, but I won't scoop out. When I do these things too, though, he scoops out entirely and even stated that I make him not want to play. Am I the arch enemy? I feel like this all started with me, but he's foregone warnings that we've taken these things out for a reason.
So I feel like the first thing that I'm noticing here, they were getting into an arms race, which happens in every playgroup across the board. Got reset back down, and I think it's starting up again. That's the first thing that I'm noticing here. What are y'all's thoughts?
I got a number of issues, and I'm gonna hold until I can list them real quick.
Okay.
Honestly, the fact that, at least from what it seemed like there, none of them really wanted to just talk. Like, they only gave ultimatums instead of just sitting down saying, hey, this is getting way too heated. Maybe we need to come to a consensus because this is just causing you to target me more often. And because of that, I need to target you more often. And this isn't supposed to be this big of a deal. We're supposed to be friends and playing a fun game.
I guess the first thing that, the first kind of step in this equation here after the lands been devastated, if you made a contract that like Numot's in the deck, but it's just a 6/6 flyer, do you care about that? Like, it's technically still a land destruction card in the deck, but like, I understand like he might have other play groups he plays with. He could still use Numot and he just doesn't want to swap out the deck card. Like, what do y'all think about that?
The thing is, you still have to pay mana into it, and as long as you are not using that ability never really happens. It's the same with a whole bunch of other different cards that have ability destroy target land. Now, if you had specific spells where the entire first part of the spell is destroy land or anything like that, then yeah, that's strictly off the table because there's no other way to get around casting that spell other than to just destroy a land.
I guess I'll start my small quip here.
Okay.
Problem 1, they play together consistently enough that they were both there for the rule of, hey, we don't want to do land destruction. And this guy clearly made it a point to the entire group, hey, I just want to keep a generic 6/6. Fine, cool, whatever. Issue number 1. Issue number 2, why not just, if it's really that big of an issue, I don't know what time frame this is. There are bajillion other 6/6 dragons for the same CMC you could get something cool out of, if that's really the problem. Both of them stepping on each other's toes because one goes, I don't like your land destruction or that it's in your deck, and I'm going to be mean to you, even though you agreed not to use it. On the other hand, the other guy, knowing it's an issue, wanting a 6/6 body, there are a bajillion of them in dragons that could just be easily swapped out if it were really a problem.
So he's not actually making the choice, but so you're on the boat where just to avoid the confrontation to just pull Numot.
If it's going to be a point of contempt, why fight to keep it in?
I think that's a valid perspective to look at here.
The other part of this equation the reason I'm a stickler against both of them is in my own opinion in Magic, is people need to stop being babies about land destruction. I am notorious for wanting more people at my play table to learn to do it properly, but to like play Armageddon. I don't mind individual land destruction because Fill the Dead is obnoxious.
That is a hot take on the Thought Vessel show.
I would 100% rather sit there and be like, hey, if someone happens to have Armageddon, because most people just don't do it, I'm not going to scoop unless I think they've clearly got the W. And it's like, either we continue playing and we get to learn how to struggle through land destruction, which should be an inherent part of the game, or it's a quick button to say, next game, please.
Yeah, for the most part, the main issue is that there's a whole bunch of people that do not know how to play Armageddon well.
But let's put a pin in that for right now, because it's definitely going to be going into our penny for your thought vessel topic here. I wanted to touch base a little bit more on this Am I the Arch Enemy? The line here, the individual I did this to hasn't let go of this. So is it just that Newmont has not come out of the deck? Like, is he just getting hit with it? Or like, was it at a game where, oh, you had a Gaia's Cradle, I had to use Newmont to blow it up?
So yeah, and that's another good point. The length of, hey, I am not going to use it this way, and probably just shown throughout multiple games, should have been understood that wasn't going to happen. And after a while, it should have just been let go if that ability didn't happen. Because guess what? He's abiding by the rules. If you're not paying for the ability and you're not destroying lands, everything should be hunky-dory.
But if you use it once...
And it seemed like he used it the once before the rule was implemented, which means that after the rule was implemented, apparently this guy's grudge got grandfathered in.
And this is kind of getting excessive too. So that they implemented land destruction, and they seem to really target me when we play, even ignoring excessive threats on the board to target me specifically with mill spells, interesting, or destruction spells.
I've got a number of issues on both sides. So I kind of view this as, the idea, the saying, walk around with a big stick. Mm-hmm. This is the equivalent to, I have this Glock in my back pocket, but now we're switching to sword fighting. I'm going to keep it on me. I'm just never going to pull it out. And then someone else keeps pulling out their Glock, and it's just two people shooting at each other over nonsense rather than like participating as intended.
Gotcha.
Like, oh, I'm going to shoot you in the foot because you have a Glock. And it turns into, well, I'm going to shoot you back, and they just go back and forth forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
So I'm also wondering the impression that this is more maybe going beyond the lines of Magic, or like just this seems more like a personal vendetta against the person, not necessarily going on the land destruction train here.
Yeah, and hence why I said that this seems like they just needed to talk. That's all that they needed to do, because like, yeah, you can have the grudge from the previous time, but they even hammered it out saying, okay, I'm just going to keep it in because I likely want to play it against other people that do still care about land destruction. But this is still like just a 6/6.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a game we play together. It's not life or death, and it's not, oh no, I don't get to play this card, woe is me. Like, it's not that big of an issue. But the problem is clearly one side is extremely petty and the other side is not willing to give the ground. They'd rather resort to being petty back, even though they didn't have relatively an option, because even when they're not being, he clearly states, he's like, they just keep targeting me when there's other things we need to do. Like, one side's just too petty and they're not willing to let go, and the other side is just petty enough to keep it going.
You just need to understand that some people are very bad at target assessment when they can only see the red in their eyes towards you.
Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone's been the target of unnecessary confrontation from a particular player. Like when I was at, MagicCon Las Vegas, there was one player that for some reason swung at me every single turn, and they kept trying to remove a spell. Like, they kept trying to take things out, but I'm just going to go ahead and just, if you swing at me, I'm going to remove the creature. And then I got to remove the creature, which made him more mad. So he'd send another creature, and I'd keep going.
And then we round about to where we actually sit. Unfortunately, my guy, I have news for you. As we probably have already indicated, you're playing Ur-Dragon.
Yeah, Ur-Dragon's just a target thing, but if what the story entails here, he's not saying, I'm doing this because you're playing Ur-Dragon, I'm doing this because you have the land destruction.
And I don't know if it's necessarily that case. Like, Ur-Dragon is definitely one of those commanders that if the person doesn't look like the threat, wait 5 turns, they're going to be the threat.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just leave them alone, because if they get going and the ball is rolling and their hand is full, like, you're probably not going to win that game.
On the same topic of like Vegas and games where we just had overly targeted people, I was playing my one one creature prismatic bridge, and there was 2 other players running like go wide boards, and another player playing the control deck. The control deck went right before me, and the entire game cast counterspell after counterspell of everything I was doing and nothing towards the 2 go wide players. One of which was playing Kranko.
Cranko cranks.
Yeah, they let Kranko resolve. But no, the one thing I was doing is too scary because they didn't understand what I was doing.
That's the other thing. Without knowing specifically what card it is, it's kind of hard to compare it against Kranko.
No, I even went into that because after, and I've spoke about this on the podcast before, that it is the Brash Taunter deck. And I've told them that it was Brash Taunter. And I told them exactly how it worked. That was apparently, I don't know what your deck does. It boggled my mind that they were doing a control deck. They said this was the first time I've done a control deck. And because I know what they're doing, I'm not going to control them. I'm going to control the person that I don't know what's happening.
You said the magical words that indicate why they did exactly what they did. And I quote, "This is my first time playing a control deck."
You were the first player right after him, so he's got all of his mana untapped and he's giddy.
But also, like, if you don't ever play a control deck, figuring out how to play control in multiplayer can be like this whole ordeal if you don't have the right people around you to be like, here's what I think, this is how you construct like your opinion about a threat. Threat assessment is like this entire thing that's different in our culture than every other card game.
And especially because at least the deck wasn't 30 counterspells, so he could do that for the entire table. It was probably like maybe 10 counterspells in the entire deck and not spreading them out effectively enough.
And like, for instance, recently I had the same type of issue where I was playing a deck and they kept removing my stuff. So I feel you on that.
Gotcha. And shout out to the control players in EDH, because that is, when you are down 3-1 when it comes to card advantage and everything, that is a hard spot to be. I can definitely understand that. But we're going to go ahead and move on here. Joe, do you think he himself was the arch enemy?
No, neither does Reddit.
Fair enough. Jacoby?
I would say they were both being archenemy.
Okay. In my opinion, I think that he was not the arch enemy. I think the other guy was on a vendetta.
Full stop. Being that egregiously petty is not good.
All right, so today on our Penny for Your Thought Vessel, we are talking about Rule 0 and how it gets exploited in current EDH play. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can go this. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the cardinal sins of EDH, why people do not like them, and then how it kind of gets out of hand and exploited.
And keep in mind, this is a constructed list of our own. This isn't like, oh, everyone's out crying about these. These are the ones we hear about. And, you know, if you don't hear a cardinal sin, tell us about yours.
And specifically, basically, we've heard about these from like a good portion of the players that we've played against. So we've got that list and we've made sure that we got that in just like a good order.
Yeah. And then one caveat here, this is in no capacity talking about CEDH. CEDH has its own thing going on. This is only in the casual side.
The rule 0 is go and try to win.
Yeah, CDH is your ticket to f about and find out on your own terms.
Apologies, Joe, for having to edit that.
Meh.
All right. So the first one on our list, combos are frowned upon. Combos in games, some people seem to not like them because they find it to be a bit anticlimactic, where you're in the middle of a game, board states are built up, maybe there wasn't a board wipe, you're going to win on your next turn, and then all of a sudden, my opponent somehow has infinite mana and he's played all the cards in his deck and now he's won.
It can be a little bit difficult because at least being one of the people who plays combo in more of a casual meta has found people say it wins out of nowhere. Jacoby,
What you want?
you've in fact said that exact phrase to me.
What you want?
It can be tricky to diagnose because you're not going to see everything on the board. Like your win condition and everything isn't going to be telegraphed as much. It, you know, everything that you need to win might just be in your hand.
And just the other fact of sometimes people can be playing like one half of a combo and people immediately think that you are playing combo in general, even if, you know, the half of the combo that you're playing is just a really good value piece.
It kind of sits in that ground of the lower your intent, the more frowny it gets. If you play with newer players, brand new players, pre-cons, it is intensely frowned upon for obvious reasons. The higher you get, the less frowned upon it truly can be.
I mean, that's fair, but I think with that as well, not all combos are created equal. Like if you're making infinite mana to use a walking ballista with a cloned mirror galvanizer or something in your mirror tribal deck, that's one thing versus a on the stack Thassa's Oracle demonic consultation win.
The more pieces it has, the less frowned upon it tends to be. Even if the loop is hard to stop, if you sit there and you go, I have actually assembled Voltron, here is the 5 parts it takes, and you saw 4 of them. It's hard to really frown upon it when you can present it as it's going.
And I think that also can work a little bit better to be less hated if you are not running a deck with tutors and you're trying to do this combo. Because I know in that Prismatic Bridge deck, I have a 2-card combo, Brash Taunter, Guilty Conscience. It will go infinite, win the game. No tutors to speak of for trying to get that. The only tutor that really matters for that deck is Prismatic Bridge. But for the most part, the combo and how many tutors you have to try and do that does matter.
And I have a Malcolm Sakashima deck that, because you can clone a lot of things, Hullbreaker Horror is super good in it. There are technically ways for that deck to go infinite mana and have everyone draw their entire deck, and then you win on your third opponent's draw step. I do not have ways to tutor that up in any capacity, but it is something that the deck is capable of doing. Now, if I win that way versus winning 2 turns later because I put a mirror box into play and hit everyone for like 40 damage, at the end of the day, everyone is going to lose at that point, or I would lose on a crackback or whatever it might be. Like, game's got to end.
And there's something to be said about people misunderstanding certain combos. People forget that interaction is key for some of them and not so key for others. Interruptible combos are, in my opinion, way better on the chart. Things like Radadrobic, Nazgul, Blasting Station. You get to interact at almost every step of the way. You have an option to stop something. It's not just, oh, I do this in response to you forever.
Now, as far as what may take advantage of that, a lot of it would probably be just like slower decks that try to win through attrition versus the combo out of nowhere, quote unquote.
Well, and I think my main concern is that when you have a meta in which the only way to win is through incremental damage, there's no instant wins out of nowhere, it's going to be extremely difficult for anyone to come from behind. You're going to know who's going to win that game outside of like maybe a farewell getting resolved relatively early on.
There are only 3 things that determine that game's victory. Who has more keywords, who has more bodies, or who has better blockers. If you put Death Touch, for instance, on like a Guardian of the Gateless, and then that Guardian of the Gateless just can't die, and you just keep booping them with like a Vigilance dude who blocks everything, their armory is worthless. You're just going to kill them slowly. On the other hand, the guy who's got 1 creature, but 30 billion tokens that are just generic 1/1s, and everyone's got a number less, turn enough sideways, they die.
Talk about an archetype of a deck that takes advantage of not having combos, token decks.
The decks taking advantage of this would likely be the ones who wanted to take up the most time, wanted to take it real low and slow. And I don't know about either of you guys because, well, maybe Levi. I value time when playing games, and I don't want to go into like 2, 3 hour slog fests.
Oh yeah, that has got Levi stamped on his forehead.
And I think with this as well, one thing that I've noticed, and one thing I noticed when I was still living in Illinois, is you could tell how long a Commander game has been going by everyone's mood almost. Like the longer you put into a game, the more you've invested, the harder it's going to hurt if you lose it. So I feel like having lighter games that end relatively quickly, and I'm talking on like the 45-minute mark versus like going 3 hours. If it's ending in 3 hours, either one, I don't care anymore. I just want this to be done. Or I'm going to be super upset if I lost this because I just wasted 3 hours of my life because of this.
Another way people take advantage of this rule is they justify doing things that are almost that. It's like, oh, no, it's no combos. It's just got all but one card and it's doing the exact same thing the combo wants to do, but it's taking 30 years with no answer because they're like, oh yeah, rule 0, no combos. I'm just going to put all of these really obnoxious time-wasting tools in the deck anyways because they're good.
Speaking of time wasting, I think we can move on to our second cardinal sin of the Rule 0, that stacks is frowned upon.
I was, in fact, originally a hater of stacks and made my group hug deck in response to stacks.
Now, for those of you that don't know, Jacoby, why don't you tell us what stacks is?
Stacks is where you play a deck with a bunch of intended effects to slow or stifle your opponents by cutting off their ability to use and or making them spend additional resources instead of game actions. You want to draw that card? Pay for it. You want to play that spell? Pay for it. You want to cast this thing? My cards say no.
Or one of the more prominent things with stacks is either I'm going to make sure that your lands don't untap so you have no resources to pay for anything, or I'm going to take those resources away by having you sack a land at the beginning of your upkeep.
Now, of all of the cardinal sins on this list, I can sympathize with this. Now, granted, as an Azorius player, I do love my stacks pieces. I do love slowing people down. However, if we're valuing time and I'm spending multiple turns just untapping like one land at a time because there's a winter orb and having to pass, that's kind of wasting my time at that point. Similar to a lot of people who don't like going against chaos decks that don't have a win condition. They're just I want to resolve a Thieves Auction 17 times in a row and make everyone go through all that.
See, you've triggered Jacob after you triggered me, and oh boy, did I have Vietnam flashbacks.
I think everyone has had that at least one time in their career. And we talked about an example of one of these in our episode talking about the worst games we ever played. Yeah. However, with stacks being the way that it is, if we did not have the ability to have the scissor to someone's paper or have the ability to slow any things down, the speed in which we'd be playing Commander, every game would be ending by turn 5. If stacks pieces or like preventative measures did not exist in any capacity, this would be one of the fastest formats out there.
100%. I've always said stacks are, like, in my mind, such a blatant necessity. However, I feel there are certain things in stacks that get way more hate than they really deserve, and some parts that don't get enough hate.
And I will say that I have, in fact, after playing CDH for quite a while, have grown an appreciation for stacks piece, especially in the 4-player pod that CDH plays in. Sometimes that stacks piece, while it may be stopping you, it's also stopping your opponents. Maybe not the person who has the stacks piece, because there are a lot of asymmetrical stacks, Drannith Magistrate, but it is still important for it to be there so that it can stop your opponents more than it's stopping you.
I love Mia Phyrexian Censor. Ooh, baby.
Drannith Magistrate was a mistake for casual Magic, not so much for CDH.
And Drannith Magistrate is one of those cards I feel gets an unconditional level of hate it really doesn't deserve.
I mean, having the ability on board, and I always refer to Drannith Magistrate as the lightning rod, because if somebody has a removal spell, it's going to get used on Drannith Magistrate, bar none, because if your opponent does not have their commander out, which Drannith Magistrate is a 2-drop, you very well, if you have that in your opening hand, you can make it so your opponent cannot play their commanders. And a lot of decks out there in the casual pod, if their commander isn't out, they are not doing a thing.
And that's just going into the build philosophy of building around your commander instead of building a deck and having incidental value with your commander.
So, and there's always different philosophies, and we're definitely going to get into that debate at some point. But with that, I think stacks is a necessary evil in slowing down certain types of decks, like your storm decks that are going to take a long time, or even some combo decks and things of that nature, that you're going to need to have ways to prevent people from just going off and racing to the finish. So
yeah, rule of law is your friend. And there are, in fact, way more rule of law effects than just rule of law.
Also, just things like Rhystic study getting way too much like, oh, over it, rather than things that are more direct and impactful, kind of right.
Always pay the one, kids.
Honestly, there's also the smothering tithe effect.
Yeah, everyone, I always love to look across the table. Smothering tithe? Do you pay the 2? And they're just like, no, get out of my face.
Yeah, but that's because paying the 2 is a lot.
Two mana is a lot. Like even like a propaganda, like that is an underrated card. How many times that someone has gone to combat and either one, spent all their mana in main phase one so they can attack me, or they're like, I'd rather do something else. I'm gonna not pay the mana for this and go move forward.
Oh my goodness. And the way God Pharaoh's statue gets under everybody's else's skin just gives me such euphoria.
That is a beautiful card. I love God Pharaoh statue.
I still hate it to this day.
2 more for that spell, sir.
See, because 2 mana is a lot.
So that's what we're learning today. 2 mana is a lot.
But yeah, specifically like propaganda and ghostly prison, stuff like that, that directly impacts the token go wide strategies. Because if you have to pay 2 for each individual one that you know that was supposed to get big damage, but now you're relegated to, I have to pay all of my mana to attack this one player, or I just don't get the big damage and don't get the big endorphins. It's always a feel bad.
Go elsewhere. Leave me alone.
Absolutely. And in response, our next cardinal sin, counterspells are frowned upon.
Our favorite counterspells. They stop the big plays from happening so that we can continue the game and try to win ourselves and hope to not get counterspelled.
And I guess part of this cardinal sin probably gets its namestay from the fact that we live in a game and format where a lot of the free counterspells are starting to get a little bit more rampant now because we're getting more reprints of them. Thank goodness. But like kind of the idea of getting free no you magic is really frowned upon, and cheap counter spells just make people upset for no reason.
I actually think that the impetus of this is that, and this is going into the story that we were talking about at Vegas, specifically, if you don't understand how or when to counterspell, you will cause a whole lot of feel bads for players probably new to Magic that aren't fully understanding of why did you do this to mine and not theirs. A lot of it is probably undue misunderstanding of how to counterspell.
And there's also the big issue with priority bullying, which we've addressed before.
You know, and I definitely can sympathize with this as well. In addition to the stacks, that, you know, you have a new card that you're really excited to play. It's in your opening hand. You have the mana for it. You go to cast it, and it's removed before it hits the table. That can definitely be unfortunate. It can definitely be a feel bad. But at the end of the day, all counter spells, it's effectively just a removal spell before it hits the table. And you have to time it correctly. It's a little bit more difficult than just like a Swords of Plowshares might be. But that's effectively what it is. It's just Blue's way of having removal. It's just doing it while it's still on the stack.
In that same mentality, there's also the unspoken counterspell of just, well, I'll just kill the thing that it's targeting so it fizzles. Because once you target a thing, it's targeted and that's locked in. If you destroy it before it can finish its thing, that's effectively a counterspell and also a removal.
And part of the real struggle is keeping in mind that the person piloting the counter spell, the reason that it probably feels like such taboo half the time is that they might not know what they're doing. Case in point, where we talked about the guy brand new to control. They go, I'm going to counter your doubling season, even though your board's empty, because that's how I think counter magic should work. And disregarding the like 5 dudes, 4 sack outlets, and whatever god else is on that other person's board, they get either trigger happy or they see a card that they think is just nothing but nuts potential with no parts for it.
And doubling season is the main reason why it's very expensive, because it's really good, but it's only good in certain circumstances.
Bro, you counter my doubling season when I'm staring down an Emrakul,
Oh, I'm absolutely going to do that.
kick rocks.
I'm absolutely going to counter a doubling season. No
Yeah.
ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, even though you could have, like, oh, you had the counter spell for that Ulamog, but you decided to wait for my doubling season when I had nothing, kick rocks.
Well, I mean, the cast trigger is already resolving. You can't really counter the cast trigger unless you're doing disallow, and then you still have the Ulamog.
Cool. I hope he attacks you and exiles the top 20 of your cards and you get to feel bad.
Return of Angry Jacoby.
Don't get me wrong. Strong card. There are instances where it is the worst thing to do.
And also, I think another thing that we're not factoring in as well is, we have removal spells. Like you can source the plowshares in Ulamog. You can board wipe a field of tokens. If somebody's going to cast an expropriate, that's going to happen right now, and they're going to get all the effects from it.
Yeah.
So unless you have an ability to counter a spell, there's enough bombs in Commander right now that you need to have some stack interaction in some capacity to make sure that the player doesn't get to take 4 turns or steal everyone's good stuff.
Or not even expropriate. How about one of the higher end, I just win the game spells, Approach of the Second Sun?
Absolutely.
Torment of Hailfire.
Weirdly enough, in the group hug deck, does not work as intended. Funny enough, when you give so many things to so many people, and then you cast Torment of Hailfire for a bajillion, they have a bajillion things to feed into it.
Yeah, but when you're staring down a Turgid deck and they go, yeah, Torment for like 10, you sweat a little bit if you say, pass priority.
That's
little
why
bit.
it's the God of Fright.
Gotta piss in my pants.
All right. So next one is, and of course, with this, any meta, counter spells, big spells, instants and sorceries are going to just prey on and take advantage of all of the counter spell free metas. They're going to hound over. Like they're going to absolutely take over. And there's nothing you can do about it because if you're going to ban counter spells, there's no repercussions to being greedy. Let me just go ahead and pump 100% of my mana into an exsanguinated win.
And you know what the weirder struggle with the counterspell dilemma is? Counterspells stapled onto creatures.
Some of them have been very good throughout the years.
Cough, cough, Levi.
And some of them weirdly costed too, like Frilled Mystic with the 2 blue, 2 green.
Yeah. Or you have the Atradi, the Resurrected, which is...
Urtai?
Yeah, sorry, Urtai. It is a card that I just recently added to Joda, and having the ability to Sisay the card out of the deck just to counter like a board wipe or something at instant speed has really been a nice little piece of tech.
I literally got stuck on the Atradi and just thought of Atradi with the body.
Proud of you.
Yeah, and then another prime example, a prime suspect is Venser.
Oh, Venser's great because Venser doesn't say counter; it just puts it back in your hand.
Yeah.
The-
Which is the most obnoxious type of counter.
The not counter spell.
Let me bounce that supreme verdict though.
Well, yeah, like Ashiok's Erasure too. I used a lot of those in the Lear deck because Lear says nothing gets countered. And nothing's get countered, and you need to deal with certain spells on the stack. You use those a lot more too.
I am a victim of sitting here and going, yeah, Narset's Reversal is my friend.
I love Narset's Reversal. It is technically a counterspell, but you also get it. Also, hey Jacob, how's that thieving taste?
I will end you.
Oh, hey, that sounds like the consequences of your own actions.
See, they wouldn't have to be if you weren't a pig.
Fucking rude.
All right, moving on to our next topic here. We're talking about land destruction being frowned upon. This is kind of an interesting thing, even noticing on card design coming up. So we used to get things like Beast Within that said, destroy target permanent. Just straight up, something that field you don't like, die. Now we're getting a lot of things that are extremely similar that say something like destroy non-land permanent. So now it's becoming harder to deal with someone who's going to drop that Glacial Chasm down on the field, or is going to have a Gaia's Cradle, or is doing Gates things.
Or Field of the Dead.
Or Field of the Dead.
Or
Or the copy of the Field of the Dead. Or the third copy of the Field of the Dead. Joe.
I feel very added right now.
Congratulations. You want a cookie?
I wanted my Field of the Dead.
I would like to wasteland your Field of the Dead in response.
Balagad Recovery, put it back.
I will keep killing it as long. Listen, we're going to treat this like Vegeta treated the androids. I will kill as many things as I need as long as it is one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And you would be frowned upon for that in the Rule Zero conversation. So this is a situation that is frowned upon and it gets a lot more hate than I think is necessarily deserved because you're messing with people's stuff, or rather you're messing with people's ability to do their stuff.
I guarantee this Rule Zero comes from a lot of games where someone plays like a heavy creature deck where it's all centered around the commander. The commander's doing big buff boy things. They think, okay, I got this. Armageddon, you can't stop my 2020 whatever because you all are weaker. And then the next player goes, Planes? Swords? You have no commander? Okay. And the game's just sitting there taking forever because you have no way to get your lands back.
And it's basically a reset at that point.
And it's basically the same thing that we were talking about very early, where it is no combos and you're just sitting there. at least with the mass land destruction, at least with targeted land destruction, it also has that same kind of, did somebody use the correct way? Like in the same strain as the counterspell, there are sometimes people will use targeted land destruction and not target the correct thing.
And there are plenty of the same instances, like I mentioned, where they just don't do it right.
And I think the main thing to keep in mind with Armageddon and even stacks, you have to have a way to break parity. If you are just doing something for the sake of causing chaos at the table, it's going to tick people off. But if, for example, back in the day, I had a Narset Voltron deck. She's hexproof, she swings in, she's got 3 more auras on her from that I've got off the top deck. You blow up the lands, and every turn I'm casting anywhere from 1 to 4 spells for free. I'm going to run away with that game by the time you have a chance to reset. But if you're in a game where you are super far behind and you don't think you can win, and you just wiped all the lands to try to reset, and then we all have to awkwardly stare at each other for the next 5-6 turns until people draw into more lands, it's going to be a problem, especially if you're not top teching lands and you don't have any.
Yeah.
And one big thing, one reason I'm a humongous stickler as to why people are like, oh, but why have less mass land destruction? It just wastes time. If you stare at enough Omnath decks, you eventually learn they are not your friends. The lands are not your friends. You think having 10 lands makes them your friends? Your resources are here to get you, because if they have a bajillion more than you, it's a detriment at that point.
Absolutely. Jacoby over here with the big stickler energy.
Listen, I've had people throw actual tantrums over me blowing up their Field of the Dead when they went to copy it. And Joe has never been one of them, but I have watched people lose their cool.
I will still be very sad.
Just on the inside.
Right, but you're not going to
No, I
throw a
won't.
tantrum.
Yeah, I'm not going to be angry at you because I was in fact doing the broken thing of making like 5.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that
Kick
kind of
rocks.
that kind of leans into it though, because if we were in a situation, and similar to people that want to ban like fast mana or things like that, if you ban the ability to not go after someone's lands, you are giving decks that have the ability to ramp aggressively with searching your deck for lands and putting them into play are going to get an extreme advantage, because it's taboo to mess with their stuff. So if any like creature based board wipe happens or a farewell, then everyone's starting in the same place, except, oh, one person has 2 to 3 times the amount of lands as everyone else.
The caveat of not targeting their lands is, if no one's going to target lands, what universe do you not run Harrow? Basically an unpunished thing where you pitch a basic and get 2 other lands that are untapped.
Now, with that, I have seen Harrow countered on multiple occasions.
Deservingly so.
We actually have a mutual acquaintance that went to go copy a Harrow and then got oppoed.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
They got oppositioned agent with a copied Harrow.
Didn't he just leave the store?
Yes, that game.
Yeah, so
Also, I have straight up mana drained his Harrow once.
I mean, at the same time, like if you sacrifice 2 lands to ramp and they both get countered, you're not winning that game. Your best bet might be just leave the store.
But, you know, it's things like that. That's a type of quote unquote frowned upon land destruction, is dealing with that kind of ramp. But if you don't, it's just going to go wild.
Now, I will say, with one of the things that we did in the draft with the Dire Strain Rampage, I actually did try that in Cody, and it makes it feel less bad if you are actually using it to destroy a problematic land and you just say, okay, destroyed that. Now you can go get 2 basic lands. You should feel better. Die Nykthos.
Yeah, Nykthos is definitely one of those casually tapping for like 8 to 15 mana. It's a big problem.
If we got more of those Dire Strains, I will never complain. I would love it forever.
It's a good design.
I'm glad that I've changed it into my deck, and glad that you had you bring it up in the podcast. It's replaced one of the like very narrow spells to create things, but now it's just more landfall for me, or artifact, enchantment, land removal.
It's beautiful.
All right, moving on to the next one after land destruction. We have mulligan until you have a good hand. This is going to be the situation that, oh, we're in a casual pod here. Just mulligan until you have a decent hand. So what this is going to do over a longer term. And now the benefit of this, of course, is that you're not going to be playing against someone who had to like go down to 4 because they kept getting a bunch of lands or they were land starved or anything like that. So you're going to have a more competitive game round. It's just when you are in a meta that is not going to have repercussions for mulliganing, it allows you to be a little bit more aggressive with your deck building.
Like specifically, there were examples that were brought up about this. Like I was watching like a Pleasant Kenobi video, and he was talking about casual mulliganing and, mulligan till you get a good hand because we're playing a casual game on a stream. And then they wanted to take a look at the deck list because it seemed like one player just kept mulliganing and mulliganing and mulliganing, and it didn't seem like they were just getting quote unquote good hands. And that's when they found out in the deck list they were running 28 lands in a casual pod. In a casual game, if you were like mulliganing and going down, you should have minimum 36 lands in your deck.
For context, what is the lowest amount of lands you have in any of your casual?
33.
33?
I don't run 36, and that's just because I'm a risky player. I will risk it for the biscuit, and I will mill down if I have to. I don't mind not taking freeze. I just want more cards.
I tend to only stop at 35, and that is usually the lowest I'll go.
I think for me at this point, because we've gotten some like island cycling stuff like that, so it's like essentially another land you can have. So it's kind of like a pauper cheating mechanic they've been using, and I've kind of been using that in EDH a little bit. But I think the lowest I go is like 34, and that's with some like MDFC lands and stuff like that in there as well. I'm usually at a higher level, but like it just also depends on the curve of the deck. If the highest thing in my entire deck is like a 3 or a 4, lands aren't gonna be as big of a deal.
My other thing is like my 33 lands in any of those decks that I have that little, all of those decks are very ramp heavy in land specifically.
Sure.
I'm running less because instead of 36 lands, it's 33 lands and like 4 more land tutors in addition to whatever I had already for land tutors.
The other side of this is that you can aggressively mulligan until you hit the Soul Ring. Or any other like 1-drop mana dork, mana rock, anything that speeds you up much faster unless you were mulliganing down.
This is another one like one of our earlier parts of this same segment, where my opinion is the lower we are, the less frowned upon it is. The higher we go in our competitive nature, the better the deck is, the more frowned upon it's just going to have to be.
Now, in CDH, you definitely have to make people commit to the mulligans, or else you could just go and get the turn 1 win every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Even in the more higher end, but not competitive end, I definitely would agree with her. I think the middle area, it's a gray area, base it off your friends and stuff. If people are really good and the moles are not helping the game life, sure. But precons, I'm sorry, mill until you hit your right hand.
All right. And the last one we have here on our list is time monopoly is frowned upon. Now, look, we always have a finite amount of time to play, and I definitely get it. If you have a Storm player that's taking 30, 40-minute turns, mechanically speaking for the game, it's going to take time for you to resolve everything, but people don't like sitting around and waiting.
It's real funny when you talked about Storm and Jacoby just doubles over and twiddles the thumb and guilty look.
Listen, okay, I feel you. I do. From the bottom of my heart. You're the one who asks me to designate all my targets. It's not entirely my fault, I swear. I'm trying to be fast.
I mean, I get it too. I'm Blink City over here, and there's a lot of little creatures that need to resolve their triggers. I understand. Some types of decks take longer. Super Friends are notoriously bad for this because there's so many things you have to keep track of. Enchantress decks are the same way. Any of these kind of value town type of decks are just going to build on top of itself until the board gets wiped.
Hell, sometimes it's not even just Storm or extra turns. Sometimes when you are playing just a Walker's deck, you're like, well, I have 20 Walkers on the field and I need to figure out how I'm going to activate them in just the right order.
And the worst feeling is sitting there with a player who has 20 Walkers and people are like, okay, I'm going to hold up interaction for you. And now they have to sit there and read. Oh, nothing. I want people to read their cards. Don't get me wrong. Nothing bothers me more than someone taking 10, 15 minutes just to read the stuff they have on the board and still not come up with like an idea of what to do.
At that point, group reading is your friend. Have designated walkers that each of you are reading. It'll cut down on time significantly.
And I think with that, the people who win in this situation are that people that benefit from this type of strategy are going to be more aggressive decks or things that are going to move very quickly because they're able to implement their strategies a lot quicker and not having to deal with a lot of value town that's going across the table. But what really gets hurt by all this is honestly the ability to breed creativity. Like if you're not able, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to play Cascade because it takes forever. I don't want to play Storm. I don't want to play Blinking Effects. I don't want to play Planeswalkers. Like you're eliminating a lot of different archetypes to build off of.
And not so much just eliminating to build off of, it also eliminates your ability to understand them at a deeper level by trying them yourselves.
And one of the biggest weird fundamentals of this is that it's going to change how people perceive long text on cards. If someone reads a paragraph, even though it's like 5 minutes of your time just to explain it, and then it's like 2 seconds, it discourages long paragraph cards.
All right, that's going to do it for our Penny for Your Thought Vessel section. We have the Thought Vessel draft next up on our agenda. This week, we are drafting IPs that we would love to see put into the extended universe. One thing to keep in mind, Marvel is off the table. It has recently been announced that we are going to have a Marvel extended universe. So the order for this week, Jacoby will be starting out at 1. I have number 2. Joseph will have 3 and 4 back to back.
Did you just call me Joseph?
Yep, you're in trouble.
What?
Use your full name.
What did I do?
You know what you did.
I'm going to copy 10 more Fields of the Dead. You can't stop me.
Armageddon?
All right, Joseph.
Counterspell.
Okay, so Jacoby, you are on the clock. We can use any IP from outside of the world of Magic the Gathering that has not already been done. What is your first pick?
Most of mine are extremely obscure. I'm going to start with my least. Ruby, RWBY.
Okay.
The Ruby universe.
And why did you want the Ruby universe?
I am extremely fond of the scenery, the story, the powers. They have this stuff called semblances and dust. They could come up with so many artifacts. The characters are cool and unique.
Yes, I in fact would love the Scyther rifle equipment.
Yeah, they have modular weapons, so things that transform into other things. And the Grim.
Yeah.
The Grim are awesome.
Usually it's a melee weapon into a gun and vice versa.
Sure.
So one of the prominent characters has a sniper rifle scythe. How I like to call the Scyther rifle.
They also have a character, she's got a rapier, but instead of being a gun, she pulls the trigger, magic stuff happens. Uses magic called semblance.
Dust.
Right, dust is the fuel. My apologies. She uses dust to fuel the semblance stuff.
Coincidentally, anyone who gets hit by that magical powder is dusted.
Yeah.
All right, so Ruby goes off the board with the first pick. I am on with number 2. Coming off of the Marvel universe being put into Magic, I'm going to pick DC. I want my Batman. I want my Superman. I want Martian Manhunter. I want Wonder Woman. I want Green Lantern.
I was so worried for a second. That is not where I thought you were going with it, and I was so worried for a second.
That's okay. Whatever you thought I was going to do, you can go ahead and go next because I just want my heroes. I want to have a Justice League Avengers legendary themed deck. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, honestly, DC is a good one, just like Marvel is. And the fact that you can get a whole bunch of different equipment out of that, different enchantments to be like the different
utility
layers.
belt equipment.
Yeah, utility build equipment. But like the enchantments also being like layers for the like superheroes and supervillains to have some kind of enchantment effect. And not just be lands. It's really good choice. And I think you can have a whole bunch of different design in there as well.
Absolutely. Similar to Lord of the Rings, you could build that out to be a whole set if you really wanted to.
Especially given the fact that it has been going for multiple decades.
Absolutely. All right, you're on the clock.
So the worry that I had was that I was going Star Wars. I, in fact, want to play Magic in that galaxy far, far away.
Star Wars is definitely the second on my list, but I really wanted Superman.
There is too many people on this planet who want Darth Vader as a commander.
Oh, absolutely.
See, that's the biggest thing is that the universe is so massive that I honestly wouldn't want to go Darth Vader immediately. I would want it, if I was doing a villain, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And especially after like Ahsoka came out and showed just how big and bad that guy is. Played by Matt Mikkelsen's brother too. That actually threw me off.
And I would like a Darth Maul Rakdos Voltron deck.
You're only saying it Rakdos because he's red and black, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Racism, it exists in the galaxy.
Wow, what? Fantasy racism? Like in all of my fantasy?
To be fair, they are just space wizards.
All right, so you have the next pick as well.
So this one is definitely more obscure and is one of my favorite video game franchises. It's Shin Megami Tensei.
Ooh, I was sweating there for a second because I also thought you might have took one of my picks.
A little dark over there.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but Shin Megami Tensei encapsulates not just the main name franchise, but also encapsulates the Persona series as well, and a lot of the Devil Summoner, a lot of things that Atlas itself has prided itself on as a JRPG company. And the fact that they've just had so many games with usually the same kinds of enemies throughout all of them, but with different characters, it can also be built out into its own set and just made very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a very interesting one you can kind of expand off into. That puts me back on the clock. So mine is, in a way, kind of cheating, but I'm okay with it. I'm going to hack the draft a little bit because with Marvel being introduced and we had an announcement for Final Fantasy, this technically could happen. Is I would love to see a Kingdom Hearts extended universe.
My brother is tuning in at this exact second. His eyes darted right to you.
Ah, yes. And I can tell you why it is semi-cheating. For the people that don't know, Kingdom Hearts technically has crossover characters from Final Fantasy.
And not just a couple of them, a lot of them.
Hey, I will take multiple versions of Cloud. I will absolutely do that.
100%. And also, it takes a lot of inspiration in how it operates from that particular franchise.
I will give you Cloud. I'm taking Vivi.
You just had to sit here. You had to take my character from me.
Now, with that being said, is it possible? Yes. Will it happen down that Lorcana exists? Probably not.
See, a lot of people said that about Marvel as well because it was still Disney. But Kingdom Hearts is one of those things that is there are certain characters you can use that are not owned by Disney to do that with. You just can't use the mainline Disney characters for Kingdom Hearts.
There's a number of issues with it and a number of non-issues with it. Kingdom Hearts is basically child-owned by a number of people.
And I think, I would absolutely let it build like a Jack and Sally partner commander deck. That would be really fun from Halloween Town. Building.
Well, see, now you're just going into Disney in general.
I mean, I would absolutely build Sora like a, Keyblade equipment tribal. That'd be super cool.
Form-changing Sora as a mechanic.
No, at that point, you're just playing Pokemon and you're just like, this evolution mechanic, you're playing a different card on top of it.
Let me play my forms.
Yeah, and that's what it is.
All right, moving on. Jacoby, you are on the clock.
So I was struggling to figure out this next one. I'm going to go with Code Geass. Code Geass is an anime about this guy named Lelouch who gets control powers. Looking into his eyes is basically a sentence to death because he's going to go, you now are going to do this and you are compelled to take the command. In the show, there's a character, his best friend, and in a panic because he's in this really messed up situation, he says, I compel you to live. And instead of doing what is barely in the means possible, he did things that should not be possible because the command made him desire to live that much.
And plus, given the fact that at least that series has spin-off series after spin-off series after spin-off series, kind of playing out the same timeline, but with different characters from like the original story to new characters that they bring in, because I know that they did Lelouch, they did Suzaku, they did Nunnally as the main character for one. Like, that one was a little bit crazy to me.
And, it's got things everyone loves. Mechs. Everyone loves mechs. It's got good villains and good heroes.
The entire Gundam franchise is screaming at you.
Well, they can suck it.
All right, well, you're back on the clock now. You can go and pick somebody else.
Alrighty, so the next one we're gonna go with Dark Souls.
I see.
I was a little worried for my pick, but
I'm gonna be honest, that's the one I was afraid you were gonna grab.
Let me
cross that off your list.
Right there.
Right. So Dark Souls, because there is no such thing as enough equipment. every ounce of equipment.
Yeah, honestly, Dark Souls has had so much of a Magic following that there is a site dedicated for somebody who did their own fan set for not only a draft, but Commander as well.
Watsy, hire that man.
It was like a team of people. Hire them.
Hire them
did,
all.
They did a really good job with like the mechanics of being hollowed, linking the fires, just all of the good equipment and good legendary creatures to be your commander. It was such a well done set.
And that
Should
particular
draft that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. And that particular franchise, those people will love it up, down, left, right, all over the place.
As I roll up my sleeve for my Dark Souls bonfire tattoo. The only one here that has it, but I didn't think Jacob was gonna take it from me like this.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I was sweating. I thought you had it.
That puts Ruby, Kogias, and Dark Souls on your draft board. I have taken DC and Kingdom Hearts to this point. Next one I'm going to take, simply for having all of the pirates, I want some One Piece.
Let me just erase that off my list as well.
Now, granted, massively popular anime, just got the Netflix show, very extensive lore, a lot of interesting characters you could build around, a lot of pirate mechanic. I'm a big fan of that. Flood that keyword with good things you can kind of build off of. Hopefully get some good stuff for Pauper too, so you can make like a Pauper Pirates list. With that being said, I think it is great. I would love to see One Piece go into an extended universe.
Certainly fair.
All right, Joseph.
You keep using my full name. Wow.
Trying to throw you off your game.
You know what you did.
In a not as long anime, it would likely be a Secret Lair.
Sure.
But I would love it to death. Gurren Lagann. My drill is the drill that pierces the heaven.
I respect it.
I didn't consider that one. I'm surprised. I'll allow it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'll allow it.
Spell resolves.
Series is chosen. On the stack, spiral, pierce through my opponent.
All right, so Star Wars, Gurren Lagann, and what was your second selection?
Shin Megami Tensei. If
Gotcha.
you need me to spell that for you, I can.
I believe you, but I don't. Pick number 4. Starting off the 4th round.
Funny enough, I would have spelled it Shi Me Ga Mi Te Se.
English teacher at it once again.
That's Japanese, you swine. But my next one, you know what? I literally going into into this draft, I had just thought of it, and I thought it was actually a great one from K.A. Applegate themselves, Animorphs.
Animorphs.
Let me take that one off my list.
Yes.
So mad.
That would be a good one. I could see it.
And then you just have Magic teaching how being a child soldier's bad.
And how transforming into animals is cool.
Transforming into animals is cool. And then also, war sucks.
War does suck.
War sucks way before the war in Afghanistan and Iraq happened. She made that series and it was almost prescient. Like, it was literally talked about one of the people on TikTok who was one of the soldiers in that war, just talking about how she came up with the concept a literal decade before that war came out, where we started just pushing 18-year-olds into combat, and how that's fucked.
A little bit.
But that is, in fact, my 4th pick, and changing into animals is still cool. Also, advocate for trans rights. Always a plus in my book.
I am on the clock. I've taken DC, Kingdom Hearts, One Piece. And then for my last pick here, I'm trying to round it out. I've got some superheroes. I've got some Disney. I've got a little bit of anime. So I want to add in one final piece to kind of round things out. And what I'm wanting to do is, for this one, is I would want it to have a essentially conspiracy 3, but I want it in the Game of Thrones universe.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
I want the flavor of conspiracy, but I want Game of Thrones. I want Mother of Dragons. I want all of it.
Just not gonna put in the incest.
Yeah, you can keep that out.
Just don't put it in the vine. It's fine.
Oh God, I immediately thought of Will and Rowan. Ugh.
It's a weird episode.
It is.
But with that said, Game of Thrones conspiracy themed, I think it'd be really cool. Shows very much about manipulating, trying to take the crown. I think that it would be perfect for that type of mechanics to work off. We already have the monarch. I'd be all about it.
That'd be fair. And just fighting for the throne, monarch would be more fun.
And get a lot more political cards out there. I always like kind of making people have those decisions. Very fun and casual play. I guess we have our final pick. Jacoby, you're up.
The first to go, the last to go.
So I'm going to go with one I didn't think about until just now, Avatar The Last Airbender.
That's a good one.
Bending in the magic universe.
Oh,
Yeah, and especially with the 6 seasons you can go off of between Last Airbender and Legend of Korra.
And on top of that, it is such an easily beloved series. There's plenty of resource material, enough love to go around, and just there's interesting things you can do with some of the lore they don't put directly into the show, like how lava bending became a thing. You could make some of the people who created that. The whole thing about the forehead blast or whatever it's called, the mind bending is what they called it or some nonsense.
I think with that, one thing we can say is with the extended universes, shout out to Wizards of the Coast. They've done a really good job trying to have the attention to detail and make these things as flavorful as possible. So I've really enjoyed some of the things that they've been doing with that. So I think it'd be really interesting to see the Avatar takes. I think that was a fantastic selection. Cannot believe that made it to the 4th round.
I mean, if we kept going, there's definitely more that we can say because I know like some honorable mentions. Yeah, that's staying in. That full stays in.
All right.
Specifically, one of the weird picks that I chose outside of Animorphs because it was in the same strain, Wishbone.
Sure.
Do y'all remember Wishbone?
What?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I remember Wishbone and I was about to choose it.
It's about to be the member berries up in here.
Yeah. Outside of that, it was also the One Piece and Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones would be cool. I do love that series. I think just with being everything the way it is, I think Wizards would have a hard time making Nazis. Even if they're like blatant villains.
Joe's
a hard
entire
print.
deflation. He's like, you got a point.
What? I can't argue. Look, I recently made the same argument that the whole reason why they can't make a whole bunch of different things with Nazis nowadays in like a joking manner is because we have so many people that grew up on content that made a joke of Nazis that didn't get the point.
Yeah,
We
but I mean,
also
Joe, just think about it. All right, my commander is Adolf Hitler. It's not that Adolf Hitler.
Oh my god!
See,
I know exactly where you got that line too.
Beautiful. That'd
My
be so funny.
God.
Shout out to the EDH Redcast.
Absolutely.
Ironically, my honorable mention is technically Minecraft.
That'd be weird. I could dig it.
So
Well, they keep expanding it so that eventually you will just get like what they're going to be doing with the Doctor Who sets, and you just get like a supplemental pack for some of the new stuff that they've created.
We got Fortnite.
So, ironically, one of the big reasons I wanted Minecraft is they have a number of characters, sure. They have a number of things. They can use a lot of the people that play Minecraft, like Dream. They have a number of content creators who do everything as a community basis. That's their whole thing. And like one of my inspirations for just existing is my heart belongs to Technoblade.
Now, the biggest question I would have with that would if they would bring in any of the mods, because some of the mods have become very ubiquitous with just Minecraft as a whole, like the Stoneblock and Skyblock.
I wouldn't be against it. That would be cool. But for me, truly, I would want a card to represent. Like, if they ever considered it, if they do not make a card for Technoblade, I will be the first person to be on their building rioting.
Any honorable mentions from you, Glorious Azorius?
I had a couple that I thought would be cool. I think one that I would have really loved to see. Now, granted, I think that we're going to have to see a bit more of extended into the cinematic universe, but I think the Chronicles of Narnia would be a very easy do. It's already set in the fantasy universe. It's got the same amount of, book length, things like that. It's something of like a Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. An Aslan commander would be super cool, like this giant lion.
And especially because I believe Treebeard was supposed to be the author of the Chronicles of Narnia. Just like I want to say there was a character in Chronicles of Narnia that was supposed to be J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were, really big friends and everything. Now, granted, they had, there was a lot of religious parallels between the two. Tolkien didn't really lean into it. C.S. Lewis did. I think when it came to actually developing these things into movies, I think that's what ended up hurting Narnia. But they've had talks of like having Netflix shows to like go through the seasons with the books and things like that. I think it'd be cool. I really do like the Chronicles of Narnia. The second one I had on my list as like just a secret lair, Monty Python and the Holy Grail would be hilarious.
Yeah, just going into Monty Python in general would just be an unset unto itself.
I
It would-
want
it would
Tim
be
the
so
Sorcerer,
beautiful.
who's actually Tim the Sorcerer.
It would be so beautiful.
I think the other thing that might have cut down a lot of the Chronicles of Narnia is that it started its development way later after Lord of the Rings got its hit. And Lord of the Rings had little graphic effects when it was doing just the original trilogy, and that's what a lot of people said hurt The Hobbit. But the Chronicles of Narnia didn't have that many like non-special effects. They kind of went whole hand into it, and I think that hurt it in the long run as well.
I got last two. One of them is mine. One of them is a friend of ours. The other last recommendation I want to give out is Harry Potter.
Harry Potter would be a good one. I don't know if they would actually do it just because of how
There's a lot
They-
of controversy. I totally get
they
it.
they made a Hogwarts set in Strixhaven and they refused to call it a Hogwarts set because of
Yeah.
the J.K. Rowling situation.
Well, and not just J.K. Rowling, but a lot of people after those kind of biases came out, reanalyzed a lot of the book, and a lot of the biases kind of slipped its way in there. One of the prominent ones was the only Irish student being good with explosions. I don't know if you know the history of the IRA, but hey, they kind of did a whole bunch of bombings and they blamed it on the totality of the Irish instead of just the terrorist sect.
You know, ironically, I did know that. I've actually been called some weird things in certain places because of stuff like that.
I also found out that my grandfather was part of the, not grandfather, great grandfather was part of the IRA.
Either way, the other honorable mention, my friend would kill me if I didn't mention it, The Wheel of Time.
Yeah, it's
Wheel
a
of-
good one.
That is one he would want wholeheartedly.
That is a show and books that I've been really wanting to get into. I just didn't know enough about it to really put it on my list, but
Well-
I've heard good things.
Well, I mean, even the person who is finishing it out as the ghostwriter is a prominent Magic player and has like his own commander cube.
So there's a possible thing for there. And like I said, my friend would murder me if I did not bring it as an honorable mention. So shout out to you, buddy.
You're talking about Kevin.
Oh, sure I am.
There you go. Hey, Kevin.
I was going to be bigger.
We can name drop Kevin. It's fine.
Oh, I mean, I was just trying to be nice, but fine.
So, Kevin, if you're hearing this, you got to come up and tell me and say hi.
You got to come into the comments and say how much each character in the Wheel of Time deserves to be a Magic.
And don't forget to rate 5 stars.
Absolutely. We definitely need some 5-star ratings out there. And of course, this is all the time we have. This is definitely a longer episode for us, but it's definitely worth it in my opinion. We are the Thought Vessel Show. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Take care.
Goodbye.